The night breeze moved gently across the city of Lagos, carrying the distant sounds of honking cars, vendors closing their shops, and the soft rumble of late-night buses. Under the massive flyover in the center of the city, a young woman lay curled on a thin, worn-out piece of cardboard. Her name was Cynthia, a 25-year-old woman who had known nothing but hardship for as long as she could remember. The bridge had become her shelter, her comfort, and her hiding place. By day, she walked the busy streets selling bottled water just to survive. By night, she returned to the same spot under the bridge to sleep, wrapping her arms around herself to keep the cold away. Tonight was no different. Cynthia sat up slowly and rested her back against one of the large concrete pillars of the flyover. Above her, cars sped across the bridge, their headlights casting long shadows that danced across the dusty ground. She watched the city lights, wondering if life would ever change for her. She had lost everything at a young age. Her parents died when she was 12, and with no relatives to take her in, she grew up in orphanages, shelters, and later the streets. She fought every day to survive, yet she held on to one thing: hope. Even in the darkest nights, Cynthia believed that one day something good would happen. Across town, another life was unfolding, one she could never imagine. Robert Lawson, one of Nigeria's youngest billionaires at 32, walked out of a charity gala with a tired smile on his face. He owned several companies, including one of the largest tech firms in West Africa. His cars, mansions, and luxurious lifestyle were the talk of magazines, yet none of it brought him the peace people assumed he had. He often escaped his world of wealth by driving himself at night just to clear his mind. That evening, he decided to take a different route home. His shiny black SUV glided through the busy Lagos streets until he approached the flyover. From afar, he spotted something that caught his attention: a small figure sitting alone under the bridge. He slowed down. Cynthia's silhouette came into view, illuminated by the dull glow of the streetlight above. She was hugging her knees tightly, her thin shoulders trembling slightly. Robert stopped the car. Something in him refused to drive away. He stepped out slowly, listening to the quiet hum of traffic above. As he approached, Cynthia looked up quickly, startled. Fear shot through her eyes, fear that came from years of being invisible, mistreated and judged. "Are you all right?" Robert asked gently. His voice was calm, soft, and nothing like the sharp tones she was used to from strangers. Cynthia swallowed, unsure how to respond. "Yes," she whispered, though the truth was far from it. Robert knelt a little to match her eye level. "Do you sleep here?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He looked around. The hard concrete ground, the cardboard, the thin blanket she used to cover herself. The sight made his heart ache. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly. Cynthia looked away. "I have nowhere else." Her voice carried a quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving more than most people could ever imagine. Robert exhaled deeply. "What's your name?" She looked at him again, unsure why he cared. "Cynthia." "Cynthia," he repeated, as if the name held a gentle weight. "My name is Robert." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cars roared above them, the city continued moving, but under the bridge, something changed. A billionaire who had everything met a homeless orphan who had nothing, and yet, in that moment, they felt strangely connected. Robert stood up and offered her his hand. "Let me take you somewhere safe tonight," he said. "Just for tonight." Cynthia stared at his hand, then at his face. She didn't know this man, she didn't trust anyone. But his eyes held a sincerity she couldn't ignore, and so, slowly, she placed her hand in his. That one decision would change both their lives forever. The ride to Robert's home was silent, yet oddly peaceful. Cynthia sat quietly in the passenger seat of the SUV, her fingers gently gripping the faded fabric of her dress. The car's soft leather, the cool air conditioning, and the steady hum of the engine felt unreal to her. She had never been inside a car this luxurious before, much less been driven through Lagos at night by a billionaire. Robert glanced at her from time to time, noticing how she stared out of the window like she was seeing the world for the first time. The passing streetlights cast brief glows across her face, revealing her exhaustion, her hunger, and yet a quiet strength behind her eyes. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. She didn't look at him yet. "I'm not afraid," she replied, though her voice carried the weight of someone who had been afraid for far too long. They turned into a quiet residential estate. Security guards saluted as the gate opened automatically. and the SUV rolled into a beautifully lit compound. A small fountain stood at the center, its gentle stream flowing like a whisper. Neat hedges lined the walkway, and soft lights glowed along the driveway. Cynthia stared in awe. "Is this where you live?" she asked quietly. "For now," Robert answered with a gentle smile. The car came to a stop in front of a modern duplex with tall glass windows and warm lights shining from inside. When Cynthia stepped out, her bare feet touched clean, smooth tiles. She had not stood on such ground in years. Robert walked ahead, then turned to her. "Come in, you're safe here." Inside, the house was breathtaking. Soft white lights glowed from the ceiling. The living room was spacious, with cream-colored sofas and a large, neatly arranged bookshelf. Everything looked spotless, soft, and warm, a complete contrast to the cold concrete of the bridge. Cynthia remained near the entrance, not wanting to dirty anything. "You don't have to stand there," Robert said. "Please sit." She hesitated, then slowly moved toward a sofa and sat on the edge, as though she feared she might break it. Robert watched her with understanding. "You must be hungry. Have you eaten today?" She shook her head quietly. "Not really." He walked to the kitchen and returned with a tray, rice, chicken, and a bottle of water. When he placed it in front of her, Cynthia stared at the food like it wasn't real. "For me?" she whispered. "Yes," Robert said, sitting across from her. "Eat, please." She picked up the spoon and after a moment began to eat slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from gratitude she didn't know how to express. Robert watched her quietly, not with pity, but with a growing admiration he didn't fully understand yet. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and looked down. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." Silence stretched between them, warm and gentle. Then Robert spoke again. "Cynthia, do you mind telling me how you ended up under the bridge?" Her breath caught. She hadn't told her story to anyone in years, but something about him, a softness, a patience, made her feel that maybe this time someone would truly listen. "I grew up without parents," she began. "They died when I was a child. I lived in shelters for a while, then with different families who needed someone to clean or help with chores. When I turned 18, they told me I had to leave." Her voice shook slightly. "I survived by doing small jobs, but it wasn't enough. Sometimes people took advantage of me. Sometimes I slept wherever I could." Robert's chest tightened as he listened. "And the bridge?" he asked gently. She nodded. "It was the only place where I felt invisible enough to be safe." Robert leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to go back there." Cynthia looked up at him, startled. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." He took a slow breath. "Because everyone deserves to feel safe. Everyone deserves a chance. And something tells me you've lived a life heavier than anyone your age should." Her eyes softened, unsure how to process kindness she wasn't used to. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "There's a guest room upstairs. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Together." Together," she repeated softly. "Yes," he said with a warm smile. "You're not alone anymore." For the first time in years, Cynthia felt the smallest spark of hope. Fragile, trembling, but real. And as Robert showed her to the guest room, neither of them knew that this single act of kindness was only the beginning of something far deeper, something neither of them expected, a love that would change their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the curtains of the guest room where Cynthia slept. For a brief moment, she didn't know where she was. The soft mattress beneath her, the warm blanket wrapped around her, and the quiet hum of the air conditioner all felt unreal, too peaceful to be her life. Then she remembered Robert. The night under the bridge, his gentle voice, the food, the safety she hadn't felt in years. She sat up slowly, brushing her fingers across the bedsheet as though making sure it was real. The room was beautifully arranged, simple but elegant, with soft cream walls, a wardrobe, and a small bedside lamp that glowed warm against the morning light. For a long time, she simply sat there, overwhelmed. No one had ever given her a place to sleep without expecting something in return. No one had ever shown her kindness with no conditions attached. A knock sounded on the door. "Cynthia?" Robert's voice came softly. "Are you awake?" She hesitated, then replied, "Yes, I'm awake." The door opened and Robert stepped in with a warm smile. He had changed into a crisp blue shirt and black trousers, his hair neatly brushed. He looked calm, confident, yet there was a gentleness in his eyes that made her feel safe. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied softly. "I hope you slept well," he added. She nodded. "I did. Thank you. For everything." He shook his head. "You don't need to thank me for basic human kindness." Her eyes softened at that. "I made breakfast," he said. "Would you like to join me?" She paused, embarrassed. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said firmly. "Please, come." They walked downstairs together, and Cynthia's eyes widened again when she entered the dining area. A small breakfast table was set with eggs, toast, and fruit juice. Nothing extravagant, just warm, simple, and inviting. Robert pulled out a chair for her before sitting across from her. "Eat as much as you want," he said. She took a small bite at first, then slowly began to eat more comfortably. Robert watched her with a quiet admiration. She had survived so much, yet there was still a softness in her spirit, a quiet grace in the way she moved. "Cynthia," he said gently, "I'd like to help you find a better place to stay, and maybe get you something to do, something safe and decent." Her fork paused in mid-air. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice trembling. "People don't help strangers like this." He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "There is something about you," he said softly. "Something strong, something pure. I don't think you've been given a fair chance in life, and I want to change that if I can." Her eyes filled with quiet emotion. "No one has ever said something like that to me," she whispered. "Then let me be the first," he replied. After breakfast, he gave her a clean dress, simple and comfortable, and allowed her to freshen up. When she returned, she looked different. Her hair was brushed, her face washed, her eyes brighter than the night before. She looked like someone rediscovering her identity. Robert smiled softly when he saw her. "You look lovely," he said. Her cheeks warmed. "Thank you." He offered to drive her to a small shopping center nearby to get essentials, but Cynthia shook her head gently. I don't want you to spend money on me." "It's not about money," he said. "It's about care." She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. They spent most of the morning talking. Cynthia told him little pieces of her life, how she wandered from shelter to shelter, how she survived by selling small items, how she always dreamed of learning something meaningful but never had the chance. Robert listened with full attention, asking nothing in return. At one point, she looked at him and said softly, "I don't understand why you're so kind." He smiled, warm, sincere, and gentle. "Because kindness saved me once too," he said, "when I was younger, and maybe this is my turn to give it back." A quiet bond formed between them, one made of trust, sincerity, and the delicate beginnings of something deeper. By afternoon, it was clear this was no longer a billionaire helping a stranger. Something was growing, slowly, quietly, but undeniably. And neither Cynthia nor Robert could stop their hearts from noticing it. Days passed gently inside Robert's home, each one softening the distance between the billionaire and the young woman who once slept under a bridge. What began as an act of kindness was slowly turning into something deeper, something neither of them had planned, yet both felt rising quietly in their hearts. Cynthia spent most mornings helping around the house, not because Robert asked her to, but because she wanted to contribute. Robert often returned from his meetings to find little things she had done: folded blankets, arranged books, dusted shelves. She moved quietly, gracefully, always careful not to intrude. One evening, Robert came home earlier than usual. Cynthia was in the living room, sitting on the floor with a book she had found on his shelf. She looked up as he entered, and a warm smile touched her face. "You're home early," she said softly. "Yes," he replied, loosening his tie. "I wanted to be." She lowered her gaze, and he noticed the slight blush on her cheeks. The simplicity of her reactions touched him more than any grand gestures ever had. He sat down across from her. "What are you reading?" She showed him the cover. "A book about leadership. I've never read something like this before. It's interesting." "Do you like it?" he asked. She nodded. "It makes me see the world differently." He watched her as she spoke. There was something in the way she held the book, the way her eyes lit up when she talked. An earnest hunger to learn, to grow, to understand life beyond survival. It stirred something deep in him, something gentle and unfamiliar. "Cynthia," he said quietly, I want to ask you something." She looked up, waiting. "Would you like to take some classes? Anything you want. It could be computer training, fashion design, catering, whatever you dream of." Her eyes softened in shock. "Classes? Me? Yes," he said with a reassuring smile. "You're intelligent. You deserve the chance to build something for yourself." For a moment, she didn't speak. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. "No one has ever believed in me like this," she whispered. Robert reached out, gently wiping the tear with his thumb. His touch was warm, careful, as though he didn't want to break her fragile courage. "I believe in you," he said softly. Their eyes held each other longer than they intended, and in that silence, something passed between them, something delicate, something real. She pulled back slightly, overwhelmed by emotion. "Thank you, Robert," she said. "You don't know how much this means to me." He smiled. "I know enough." That night, Cynthia stood on the balcony outside her room, looking at the city lights. The same city that once ignored her now seemed softer, kinder. She wrapped her arms around herself and allowed herself, for the first time in years, to imagine a future that wasn't defined by survival. Robert joined her quietly. "Beautiful night," he said. "Yes," she whispered. "Very beautiful." They stood side by side, the wind brushing gently against them. Robert glanced at her, and the city lights reflected softly in her eyes. "Cynthia," he said slowly, "I want you to know something." She turned to him. "You are strong," he said. "You are deserving. You are more than the life you were forced to live. I see you, not the girl under the bridge, but the woman you are becoming." Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that. His words reached into places inside her she didn't know were still alive. "Robert," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why do you care so much about me?" He took a slow breath. "I don't know how to explain it yet," he said softly, "but something about you touches my heart in a way nothing ever has." Her heartbeat quickened. "I don't want to overwhelm you," he added. "I just want you to know that you matter, to me." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not a billionaire, but a man with a gentle soul, a man who offered her safety, dignity, and warmth without asking for anything in return. In that moment, something opened inside her, a small, quiet doorway to hope. Neither of them spoke again. They stood together under the night sky, close enough to feel each other's presence, far enough to respect the fragile space their hearts were slowly learning to cross. Love had begun to grow, softly, quietly, beautifully. Weeks turned into months, and Cynthia's life transformed more than she ever believed possible. She started attending classes at a small training institute Robert recommended, learning computer skills, communication, and personal development. Every morning, Robert's driver took her there, and every evening she returned home with a new brightness in her eyes. Robert watched this growth with quiet pride. He found himself looking forward to her stories about each day. How she learned to type faster, how she solved spreadsheet exercises, how she made new friends. Her joy was contagious, but something else was growing too. The bond between them was changing, deepening, becoming something that neither of them could hide anymore. One Saturday afternoon, the house was unusually quiet. Cynthia was in the garden, watering the small flowers Robert had planted months ago. She wore a simple sky-blue dress, and the sunlight made her skin glow softly. Her smile, gentle and unforced, carried a warmth that made Robert stop in the doorway to watch her. He realized in that moment just how deeply he loved her. Not because of her beauty, not because she lived in his house, not because she needed him, but because she carried a strength that humbled him, hope in the midst of pain, kindness despite hardship, and a heart that remained gentle even when the world wasn't. Cynthia looked up and noticed him watching. She smiled shyly. "You're home early," she said. "Yes," he replied, walking toward her. "I wanted to see you." She lowered her gaze, her heart beating faster than she expected. Being near him felt different now, a quiet warmth she could no longer pretend she didn't feel. "Cynthia," Robert said gently, "can we talk?" She nodded and followed him to the small outdoor patio. They sat on opposite sides of a glass table, the afternoon breeze brushing softly around them. He took a slow breath. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you." She waited, her hands clasped together on her lap. "When I found you under the bridge," he began, "I only wanted to make sure you were safe. I had no idea how much you would change my life. But you did. You brought peace to my home, you brought honesty to my heart, and without meaning to, you became important to me." Her eyes softened. "Robert," he leaned closer, "I know your past was hard, I know the world wasn't kind to you, but what I feel for you is real. I don't care where you came from. I care about who you are." Her breath trembled. This was the moment she feared and longed for at the same time. "I love you, Cynthia," he said softly, "not because I rescued you, but because you rescued me from a lonely life." Tears gathered in her eyes before she could stop them. She covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say what your heart feels," he replied gently. She lowered her hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I never thought anyone would love me," she whispered. "I never thought I deserved it. But you made me feel seen. You made me feel safe. And I—" Her voice broke. Robert reached across the table and took her hand, holding it firmly. "You what, Cynthia?" he asked softly. She looked into his eyes, her heart laid bare. "I love you too." A quiet breath escaped him. A breath of relief, of joy, of everything he had held inside for months. He stood, walked to her side, and gently pulled her into his arms. She melted against him, her face pressed to his chest, her tears warm but full of hope. He held her like he had finally found the missing piece of his life. When she looked up at him again, he brushed her tears away. "You will never sleep under a bridge again," he whispered. "Not for as long as I live." Weeks later, they held a small engagement ceremony in his garden, surrounded by a few friends and staff who had watched their story unfold. Cynthia wore a simple white dress, her smile brighter than the sunshine above. Robert slipped a ring onto her finger and said, "Thank you for choosing me." She whispered back, "Thank you for finding me." And that day, as they held hands beneath the warm Lagos sky, Cynthia realized something powerful. The girl who once slept under a bridge had become the woman a billionaire chose to love, not because of her past, but because of her heart. And together they began a new life, one built not on wealth, but on love strong enough to rewrite destiny. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you like the story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.